of great conversations and talks. I'm Yashodhika Rajshekar, hosting today's show. It's a great pleasure to introduce our speaker today, who is going to talk to us about the current technological trends and how it differs in India compared to the Silicon Valley. Our speaker, though having spent almost his entire career developing software and advising on the same for different use cases, grew up in India and later moved to travel to different countries. He holds the prestigious ERDAS number 3 title and has specialized in software architecture, application design, and much more. He continues to guide students as well as the professionals in different fields of computer science. Everyone, please join me in welcoming Mr. Raj Madhuram, the co-founder and CTO of C1X and alumnus of GCT, batch of 1995 CSE. Before moving on, our team has something for you, sir. Hope you liked it, sir. Before moving on, we have some instructions for the participants. The participants are asked to mute yourselves, and if you have any queries, please post it in the chat box. Now, the stage is all yours, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yash. I hope you guys can see me. It has been thank you. It was a fantastic introduction. I guess I'm really flattered. But thanks for the kind introduction. Thank you for GSAR and the entire team who has put together this meeting. I also welcome each and every one of you who has is participating in this talk. So let me share my screen 1 second. All right, I hope everybody can see my screen. So the topic today is basically, I'm going to talk about the current tech trends from a Valley perspective. So I've been living in the Silicon Valley for the last few years, and I've been observing a few things that I thought I can share what I'm seeing in the trends and the things that makes the Valley tick, right? So let me on to the next one. Before moving into the discussions, this is our team. So I'm the co-founder and the CTO of C1X, and we have a team based in San Jose and in Chennai. So we started in 2014. So basically, myself, Mukund, our co-founder, so we wanted to basically transform or change the way advertisements are bought and sold. So that was the kind of desire that we had. So we came out of Yahoo, and then we started this company. And we are headquartered in San Jose, California. And we also have office in Chennai and Tokyo. So this is some photographs of the previous year's teams. All right. And I would like to also introduce you my first computer. So I'm really, most of my talks I start with this because I really love this computer, which I had when I was studying in my 10th standard. So I was basically pestering my dad to get this computer, right? I wanted a ZX Spectrum, which is also a similar computer, but then someone sold this computer to him. So Anyway, this is called Color Genie. This computer had 32 kilobytes of RAM, okay, 32 kilobytes and 16 kilobytes of ROM. And the resolution was 160 by 102. So you had 160 pixels by 102. And if you compare with your cell phones that you have in your pockets today, your cell phones has 1 million times more memory, okay, and 100 times more resolution, right? And to use this computer, you have to connect to a television set. And then the tape recorder was the disk IO. So it does not have any hard disk or anything. So you'll have to connect to a tape recorder. And my file system was a cassette tape, right? So you have to basically know which counter. So the tape recorder had a counter actually. So it basically keeps moving as the tape keeps rotating. And so you will have to actually note it down on the flap of the cassette tape. And my program X starts at this particular counter. So if you really mess up, then you'll lose everything that you programmed. So, but then the reason why I'm showing you is this. This basically opened up my eyes to the world of computing, basically, right? And owning a computer was really fantastic at that time. And it gave me lots of insight. Basically, I knew exactly the memory layout, so you could really get close to the hardware. And it basically sparked a lot of curiosity in me. And that's something I think I took it with me over the years throughout. All right. So the agenda for today's talk, I've split it into 3 sections. One is starting with Silicon Valley. Okay. What is Silicon Valley, and why is it such a big deal, right? Most of us are living in Chennai or Coimbatore or close by areas, and the Silicon Valley is like 12,000 kilometers away, right? Why do we really care about Silicon Valley? And also, let's look at some of the tech trends, which there are lots of tech trends happening. I just picked like 4 or 5 today, and its roots in the Valley. Some of the things that I was tracking over the years, and just to give a little flavor of why Valley is prominent in those areas. And then the third agenda is can we replicate the Valley? So just want to ask the question, kind of strike some conversations. Just by knowing the Silicon Valley and looking at the tech trends, we can ask the question, can we replicate the Valley, right? What does it take for us to have an ecosystem like the Silicon Valley? So that's my agenda today. Okay. All right. So to start with, the first section of my presentation is about the Silicon Valley. So we are going to learn about the geography, the economics, and the history of the Valley. I'm not going to bore you to death, but I hope this will be a little bit fun introduction. The year was 1997. I was basically studying I was doing my master's at UCF at the time in Florida, and at that time I made my first trip to the Valley. So my friend there was running a startup company, and actually I went to present a paper in a IEEE conference, and so I stopped by him, and then he took me around, right? And he showed me around all the places. It was really fantastic to see all the the tech companies, so many tech companies that you read about and you work with, you read about in the papers. All the tech knowledge being concentrated in one area was so fascinating to me at the time. And later on in 2000, actually, I joined his startup company. And I've been like, moving back and forth between Chennai and Silicon Valley. The last 10 years, I've been, based in the Valley, and I've been, traveling back and forth. All right. So let's start with the geography of the Valley. Okay. Let me switch my screen. I hope you guys can see the map. Is this visible? That's an interactive map. Just want to confirm.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you. So just want to give an idea of the geography of the Silicon Valley, where it is situated, right? So we all know United States, and in the West Coast, we have the California region. So I'm going to just zoom in. So on the West Coast, we have this whole region starting from San Francisco on the north, right? So this is San Francisco and all the way to San Jose on the south. So this is the whole geographical footprint of the valley. So what we call as Silicon Valley. And this map actually shows all the companies that are situated within the valley, all the startup companies. Some of them are startups, still startups, some of them more established, but they all had their roots in the valley, right? So you can see the concentration. It's so amazing to see so many companies. And let me walk you through a few of them, right? Let's take a tour. So let's start with San Francisco. All right, so that icons are a little small, but you can see Uber has a headquarters here. Their market cap is like $89 billion. You have Square, which is a payment processing system. We have Pinterest. I think most of you have heard of Pinterest. You have Lyft here, very close by, market cap $19 billion. And many other companies. We're not going to go through each and every one, but so this is San Francisco. And then going down, the Redwood Shores, we have Oracle, which has a market cap of $226 billion. Then we have Sumo Logic, which is a data company, some C3 AI, and we have Palo Alto. This is completely ruled by Facebook, right? Now they, of course, you guys have known, they changed the name to Meta. We'll come to that. And then we have, down here, this one shows Tesla here, which is a electric vehicle company. Most of you might have known, they make electric cars. Actually, their manufacturing is in the East Bay in Fremont, but they have an office here, almost $600 billion cap. And down here in Mountain View, we have Google, which is almost $1.6 trillion company right now. And then down here in Cupertino, we have Apple, right? $2.26 billion company. And then in San Jose, we have Adobe, we have Zoom, which we are using currently. And we have McAfee, so many other companies that we'd be familiar with, right? And we have Logitech here on the East Bay, and Workday, and a few other companies. So it's really amazing to see the concentration of this company. So many companies have started within a relatively small area. So this whole thing is like 47 square miles. And within this, you have, pretty much a lot of the names that we have heard about. We have Roku, we have, so many things I missed, but you get the idea, right? So many companies are concentrated within one area. So this is kind of to get an idea of what we call as the Silicon Valley. So let me switch back to the slides. So that is about the geography. Okay, so now let's talk about a little bit of the economics of this whole Silicon Valley. So let me ask you a question. Do you know, sorry. Okay, can you guess what is the GDP of India? Any idea? So GDP, if you don't know, is the gross domestic product, right? So this basically is like whatever things that people sell, right? Produce and sell over a period of a year. Like all the combined, every person in India makes and sells a service, could be a product. So if you combine everything together, right? What is the gross domestic product?
We have some guesses in the chat, sir. 3 trillion USDs.
Yeah, fantastic. So yeah, so it is 3 trillion. For some reason, in 2021 estimate is 3 trillion USDs, and a trillion is one followed by 12 digits, right? It's 1,000 billion. It's a huge amount. And now, if you take this Bay Area companies, like a handful of them, right? Not even I just added them together, some of them. So the market cap of Bay Area listed companies is greater than $5 trillion. Okay, so that's really a mind-blowing number, right? So all the entire economy of India, everything that we produce in a year is much less than the things produced by, or the market cap is basically the outstanding shares. If you had to buy all these companies, right, that's what it costs now. It's much greater than the entire GDP of India. So basically, then now we are very curious, right? Like, what does it mean? Like, why is this the case? So this is something that is really fascinating for me. So let's look at some of the other things, like the history, and that will give us some clue of about why Silicon Valley works this way and why is it so much valued. Let me go to the next slide. For some reason, my animation's not working properly, so bear with me. Okay, next slide. Okay, I have a video to play, so let's watch it together. So this is a video, I think, this few years back, 2017 video. So the valuation might be a little different, but let me start playing.
$3 trillion neighborhood, thanks to companies like Apple, Google, and Tesla. But it wasn't always this way. In the late 1800s, San Francisco's port helped make it a hub of the early telegraph and radio industries. In 1909, San Jose became the home of one of the country's first radio stations. In 1933, the Navy purchased Moffett Field to dock and maintain the USS Macon. This made Moffett Field a major hub for the early days of the aerospace industry. Many scientists and researchers all found work in the area. In 1939, the Ames Research Center was founded in the area, and it became home to the world's largest wind tunnel in 1949. Also in 1939, William Hewlett and David Packard founded Hewlett-Packard in Palo Alto, which originally made oscilloscopes. Then, during World War II, Hewlett-Packard made radar and artillery technology. At this point, computers were about the size of a room. In the 1940s, William Shockley co-invented the transistor while at Bell Labs. The transistor is now known as the computer processor. In 1956, Shockley left Bell and founded his own company, Shockley Semiconductor Labs. It was the first company to make transistors out of silicon and not germanium. The company was founded in Mountain View, California, so Shockley could be closer to his sick mother. Shockley's company employed many recent graduates from Stanford. In 1957, 8 Shockley employees grew tired of his demeanor and left the company. Shockley called this group the Traitorous 8. They partnered with Sherman Fairchild to create Fairchild Semiconductor. In the early 1960s, Fairchild helped make computer components for the Apollo program. Later in the decade, many of the Traitorous 8 left Fairchild, including Gordon Moore and Robert Nice, who in 1968 founded their own company in Santa Clara called Intel. Soon after, other ex-Fairchild employees and Traitorous 8 members helped found AMD and venture fund Kleiner Perkins. In 1969, the Stanford Research Institute became one of the 4 nodes of ARPANET, a government research project that would go on to become the Internet. In 1970, Xerox opened up PARC Lab in Palo Alto. PARC invented early computing tech, including Ethernet computing and the graphical user interface. In 1971, journalist Don Hoefler titled a 3-part report on the semiconductor industry, Silicon Valley, USA. The name stuck. In the 1970s, companies like Atari, Apple, and Oracle were all founded in the area. In the 1980s, Silicon Valley became the widely accepted center of the computer industry. eBay, Yahoo, PayPal, and Google are just some of the companies founded in the area in the 1990s, with Facebook, Twitter, Uber, and Tesla joining them the following decade. The growth of the tech industry in the area continues to this day.
All right. I hope that gave you a very good overview of how the Silicon Valley came to be about. So we can know that even from the transistors to the microprocessors, the first computers, even the graphical user interface, which was invented in Xerox, and the internet. Now, basically all the technology building blocks that we take for granted today, right? So they all originated, most of them originated in the Valley. So I think that is very important to understand the context, right? So a lot of these things came together, and we see the culmination today. If you see the valuation of these companies, one of the fundamental reasons is there's a rich history behind these things, right? And a lot of these companies the new companies that we see are all basically founded on top of the legacy that's been set by the fundamental building blocks, if you will. Right. Cool. So that is about now I hope you got a pretty good idea about the location and the history and the economics of the Silicon Valley. So let's look at a few of the tech trends, the current tech trends. So I kind of listed a few of them. There's so many things to talk about, but I kind of listed only 5 of them. And I'm going to talk a little bit about each of them, why it matters to me, and some of the links to the Silicon Valley. Yeah. So basically, we are going to look at a few things today. Big data, AI, ML, which is a very important trend that we should be looking at. Another thing I've been following for quite a while is the EV and the autonomous vehicle space, and 3D printing, which is quite dear to me, and blockchain, cryptocurrency, and I guess many of you would have heard about that as well. And something new which people always talk about nowadays is called Metaverse. So we look at these things one by one. Okay, so let's start with the big data. So this is a very interesting chart, and I'm not sure whether if you guys have seen this anywhere. This is from a company called Domo. They release this chart every year, right? So this is for the 2021. First, let me start with the chart on the right side, which is pretty colorful, right? I'm not going to look at each of these things, but this tells you the amount of data that is generated in every minute, each minute of every day, right? Google conducts 5.7 million searches in every minute, right? TikTok users watch 167 million videos, and Twitter users, they post 575,000 tweets, and so on. So it's immense scale, right? I mean, you can just imagine one minute you have 2 million Snapchats. So much of data is getting generated, right? All this data in form of text, you have video, you have audio. Clubhouse is a recent phenomenon where you basically interact with people using audio exclusively. So all these applications, so many social type of applications, shopping, e-commerce, right? Financial like Venmo, so many other things, right? So every day or every minute we are generating so much data, and there's an estimate of how much data that we generate in 1 year. In 2021, it is 79 zettabytes. Okay. Each zettabyte is 10 raised to the power 21. So you put 21 zeros after that, right? So that's 79 followed by 21 zeros. And it's a humongous number. To give a scale of this, right? If you add all the grains of sand in the whole world, right? You go to all the beaches, desert, you take all grains of sand. This number is 10,000 times the total number of grains of sand. So that is the amount of data that we are generating all over the world this year. So with so much amount of data that is generated, right? How can we make sense of this data? And that is a very, very fundamental question we can ask, right? So if you are having a e-commerce site, if you have even a blog, you basically generate a lot of data. You have visitors who come into your site. How can we provide a proper service to them, right? So making sense of data is very important. And that basically gave rise or resurgence in this whole artificial intelligence, machine learning. These are not really new. Actually, these, they existed in 70s, 80s, but then there's a huge resurgence of this AI, and primarily due to this amount of data and the progression of technology and the computing capabilities that's been exponentially increased over the years, right? And we are able to do a lot of things like predictive analytics, like predicting how things will trend, and providing what we call as actionable insights to crunch a lot of this data and give the users, hey, if you do this, then such a thing will happen, or this happened because because of certain things that happen. So because humanly it's impossible to look at all this data today. Even if you're running a business or things like any kind of applications. It's very difficult for humans to look at all this data and make sense of it. So we need really help from the machines to do that for us. Right. So let me go to the next slide. So this is a quote from Sundar Pichai, the CEO of Google. He said that we are evolving from a mobile-first world to an AI-first world. In 2000s, early 2000s, we were like pretty much desktop based, right? All our applications, we had to like come to a computer, and then we had this huge explosion of mobility. We had mobile devices. So then we said mobile first. So a lot of these applications we started building for mobiles. And now we have been transitioned. Actually, we are already in the AI first world. So everything pretty much around us, so many things has AI. So what I call as ubiquitous AI, right? It's everywhere. AI is pretty much everywhere. Even if you look at today, I don't know if any one of you had ordered from Swiggy. Even if you open your Swiggy application today, the listings, right? The orders in order in which your restaurants are listed is based on a lot of data that you had provided, basically. So you might have ordered somewhere, or even within Swiggy, you might have, if you order a lot of chicken or fish, then, you probably get similar, similar items in the top versus, those are idli, right? So depending on your preferences, Swiggy knows how to order. And that's, they would have probably lots of machine learning models and things like that to help with that. IPL was recently over, and I know you guys, all watch, a lot of you watch World Cup 2020, right? And you see this small score win predictors, and these are all pretty much predictive analytics, right? Sorry, I'm getting some disturbance. 1 second. Yeah, thanks for muting. So we have this score predictors and the win predictors, right? So how much this team will score. So based on the data, so there is no you can't have algorithms to do that. So pretty much you need to rely on some neural networks or what we call as machine learning. So the machine has to learn from data and then do some predictions. What is the percentage of win, a team A or team B is going to win. So these kind of systems. And the news and social feeds, right? If you watch Google today, the news feeds that you have is pretty much personalized. And even the social feeds are all personalized. So the ability to personalize, it's very, very crucial today, right? In today's apps. And what makes it possible is the amount of artificial intelligence that we have, the progression of the AI and the tools and the technologies powering that, right? And that takes a lot of data and crunches basically, and then predicts what you would like based on your past performance, and then gives you the proper, the relevant feeds for you. And even the advertisements, right? So our company, we do a lot of marketing technology. We are in the ad tech space, and we want to basically provide the right advertisements for the right people, right? So how do you do that? You have so much of data. Even let's say you visit a website today, right? A single HTTP call has tons of information about you, right? It has information from where you are browsing, the location, what we call as the IP, right? From the IP, and some even could have, even from the apps that you can even get you the GPS coordinates from where you are, and can tell you what browser you're using. I can tell you, what device you're coming from, and from that device, we can probably derive certain characteristics of the user, right? if you're an iPhone user versus an Android user, things like that. So we can know a lot about the users. So even even without you giving some consent about storing cookies or anything, a lot of things can be understood by the context, the pages that you go to, right? And so the advertisements can be like tailored to your likes, basically. And there are fraud detection, unusual activity alerts, spam filters, voice assistants, and you name it. So my point is like AI everywhere today, right? And this is something that is really taken off and is really fascinating. And customer data, understanding the customer's behavior, that's something that we are currently working at C1X as well. We would like to know what the customer buys, how much they are purchasing, what is the life cycle, what we call as the lifetime value of a customer. Basically, if you know the customer better, we are also able to serve the customers better and provide some recommendation and so on. And this is actually one of the prototypes that we made. So we do a lot of dashboards, prototypes. We have as part of some of the products that we have developed. And this one basically is a social prototype. We are basically taking data from Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, and this is a real-time dashboard. So it collects the last 7 days tweets and shows it in a nice graphical way, right? And we also do sentiment analysis here and say, for Nike, it's been like positive, it's okay, but for Adidas and Under Armour, it's been very positive this week. And you could also look at the current tweets and the tags and stuff like that. So there's so much information, right? About 200, 400, 500,000 tweets total, if you look at that number there. And we take, we do the number crunching. We crunch all these tweets and give some information that is very actionable and also very digestible. So doing this, we need. So this is something that is possible by using lots of technologies today. There are lots of tools. We have real-time analytics enabled using Elasticsearch and Druid and other lots of different technologies that we use. And so it's very imperative that data, the big data and AI plays a very prominent role in today's everyday life. And why does it matter to me, right? So data. So someone said data is the new oil. And there are other interpretations as well. It's the new gold or new oil, right? It's a very valuable asset. So this day and age, data can be sold as a commodity, right? You can actually sell data of your customers. You can buy data, and then you can target the customers. And with that, there's a lot of responsibility as well. So we have to be worried about the privacy of users, right? That's why there's like laws such as GDPR. We heard about CCPA, some regulations like that. Which gives users some control over the data, basically. So we cannot just take everybody's data and then just sell it to anybody else. So our company C1X's core business lies in basically taking data, gathering data, analytics, providing insights for marketing, and so on. So it's really something that I've been tracking for a while. And the Valley connection. So we have so many technology companies out of the Valley. starting from Oracle. And the recent Snowflake, Databricks, Segment, you might have heard about a few of these, right? Treasure Data, and we have these analytics companies, ClickHouse, Elastic, Druid. They all have origins in the Bay Area. So much work in the data is happening, and that's really fascinating as well. Okay, the next section is about EV and autonomous vehicles. As most of you know, electric vehicles are the vehicles that run on electric power, right? 1 second. Yeah. So why are we caring about electric power? It's much more cleaner energy than burning oil and releasing carbon dioxide to the environment, which is really toxic. And there's lots of technology involved with the electric vehicles, right? Especially the battery technology. So you want to make sure the electric vehicles are, have a sufficient range. So, by the way, electric vehicles are not new. People have been creating electric vehicles since the day of electricity, like even early 1900s, 1930s. so on. So there have been lots of iterations, but then really the battery technology was not advanced, right? And so there's a tremendous advancements in the battery technology today that increases the range. And companies like Tesla and now Lucid, they have batteries that can last for like 500 miles in one charge. So you can actually travel a long distance in one charge. And so you don't have to like stop at multiple places to charge them. And also size matters here, because the bulk of, what the electric vehicle carries is the battery, and the lesser the size, or what they call as the kilowatt per hour by the volume, is very, very important. And this is a very it's a booming industry, if you will, right? So the projections are like in 2030, almost 50% of the total global shares of sales would be electric vehicles. So now we are in the 2021. Here it's like less than 10% or 5%, that range. But then the prediction is that in another 10 years, electric vehicles are going to take off really, really fast. And there's so many things to solve, even in the electric vehicle space. And that's something that's we need to keep an eye out for. And I would like to show another video. This one I filmed when I was in a trip to Intuit's headquarters. This is near. Yeah, I'll stop at that. So this one actually, I was visiting Intuit office, and I saw this robot, right? So this was really fascinating to me. So you could see that it was driving autonomously, right, without anybody to actually assist the driving. So this is an example of autonomous vehicles, and it's a challenging problem. So if you notice, it was at the intersection, and then it has to decide, whether to cross or not, right? And this is not something that you cannot easily program into a system, because this has to be aware of its surroundings, right? So how is it aware of the surroundings? Then it has to, look at all the images around it, or it has to use it probably has a lot of sensors as well, right? And then figure out based on object detection in the image, making sure there are no people or no vehicles there close vicinity, and then it's basically moving around. So it's really fantastic. And I saw you can see lots of other examples like this in the valley as well. Like other day I went to a store called Walmart, and you see like robots scanning the aisles basically. So it's very, very interesting piece of technology, if you will, and it's very evolving, right? So using this autonomous vehicles they are not still in like production ready. So you don't have like an autonomous car. You cannot own it today. There's lots of work to be done there, but lots of progress has been made. Significant advancements have been made in that area. Although you can actually drive some Teslas with that auto capability, but it's not fully you cannot take your hands off of the wheel, but it can drive by itself. So that's really fascinating. So why does it matter to me? And I think it's really transformational, right? This technology did not exist like 10 years back, right? We did not have like a lot of electric vehicles on the road. And then we did not have so much of advancements in the autonomous driving as well. And this is a whole convergence of transportation, AI, big data, software. It's really, really fascinating. And also what's also enabled transportation as a service, right? So you see the development of companies like Uber, Lyft, and things like that. They are also into autonomous vehicles now. They wanted to have a fleet of autonomous vehicles in the future that take people around without any drivers. And the Valley connection, we have Tesla, Elon Musk, probably you would have known and heard about a lot of times. He basically revolutionized the entire auto industry by using with Tesla. And we also have Google's Waymo. And I also listed something called Skydio, which I saw a demo once. And there was an autonomous drone. So this is like a flying drone that can fly itself, right? Usually drones we have to control, but then Skydio is making something. It's very, very autonomous. So it can actually detect objects, the hazards around it. It can basically do a path mapping, right? And it can avoid the trees. It can go around and take nice pictures, nice videos. So that's a really fascinating technology like that. All right. So the next one, another piece of technology I'm really, I track and fascinated about is blockchain and cryptocurrency. I'm not going to be going into the details of, lots of details about blockchain. But fundamentally, if you go to a bank, right, a bank keeps track of your transactions, you make deposits, you do the withdrawal, you can write checks to other people, so on. So it keeps a ledger of all the transactions. But with blockchain, it's a distributed digital ledger. So this is very, very fundamentally different than a centralized mechanism like a bank, where a bank holds everything and you really trust the bank to do everything properly, right? And if the bank does anything weird, then everything is pretty much corrupted. But blockchain has this property of immutable records. So once it is written, it cannot be changed. And so that is really, really fundamentally different. And then it's also distributed. So if two people are on the, if do a transactions, they can have the same copy. They will have the same copy of the entire, ledger basically in their hands. So no one can cheat or do any kind of funny business. So that's really interesting. And if you want to learn about blockchain, cryptocurrency, this is a nice demo. So I will make this link available later, and you can actually learn about the fundamentals of blockchain, what is hashing, how can you create a small blockchain, and so on. So it basically the blockchain disrupted fintech, right, a lot, and pretty much banks, now even the banks have started adopting blockchain, and there's tons of applications of the blockchain itself. And there's a cryptocurrency aspect to it. Blockchain and Bitcoin are pretty much interconnected, right? So the first paper was about blockchain and Bitcoin. Bitcoin was the coin that was using blockchain. And the Valley connection, we have Coinbase, which is a company. I don't know if anybody has transacted any Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency.
We have comments saying students have read about it, but haven't tried it yet.
Okay, cool. So if you want to really, if you want to try, there actually, even in India, I think there are a few startups right now offering you, where you can go and buy cryptocurrency. But Coinbase really pioneered that. So what we call as fiat currency. Fiat is the actual US dollars or Indian rupees, the currency that we use. So if you want to take your fiat currency and then exchange it for a cryptocurrency, you can use a system like Coinbase. And they are like, their valuation went through the roof. They went IPO recently, and it's about like $100 billion. And I think it just came a little bit to 85 nowadays. But it's a huge, company right now. And there are also tons of blockchain startups in the valley as well. So this is some space to watch. Another technology that I'm closely following and very interested in is the 3D printing. 3D printing is a way where we can rapidly prototype, right? You can actually imagine. So imagine anything that you want, you can model, and then you can really make things. So that's the essence of 3D printing, right? You can imagine anything, you can build, you can model it in a 3D environment. You can translate into a STL file, and then you can slice it, and then you can really have that object within an hour's time, right? So it has tremendous applications in education, rapid manufacturing, automotive, aerospace, construction, you name it, right? So that is something that I closely follow, and I also own a couple of 3D printers as well. And so today you can actually go, and you don't even have to model. You can go to this site called thingiverse.com. This will list so many objects, right? Even like day-to-day objects. If you lose a camera lens cap, for instance, I broke a lens cap, then I went to this, and then I downloaded a lens cap object, and I got it printed, right, within a couple of hours time. So it's even faster than your Amazon Prime, right? So you can actually go and print it, and you can choose your colors, whatever you want, and then you can have it done. And that is one utility aspect of it. But then where it really sparks is your imagination, right? So you can actually imagine anything you want. You can, create new products, right? That's really amazing that, you can, and they're very, it's not expensive at all. Today, you can own a 3D printer for less than, 10,000, 20,000 rupees, right? And so one thing that I'm actually, passionate about, or wanted the students to try out, is basically make your own 3D printer. I also wanted to basically create a poll the students today who are in the attendance, like, has anyone tried out 3D printing, or anyone own a 3D printer?
Yes, so we have students saying they've had parts made of 3D printing for their projects.
Okay.
And some others are really interested to get one or to even make one.
I see. Awesome. So yeah, I think it's very accessible nowadays, right? So it's not like something that only labs can have. It's even personally you can own one, and then you can try it out. So I think definitely I think you should look into this. Another neat thing is, like, why can't we make 3D printers, right? That's a question that I asked. Like, a lot of these 3D printers today come from China. We can actually get kits today. There's an open source Prusa kit that we can actually, all the entire designs are available. So if there's a collaboration between mechanical students, electrical, computer science, we can come together. We can make our own 3D printers, and we can sell it locally. We can inspire a lot of kids, for instance, right? So that's something that I would encourage people to think about. So as I was mentioning, I like tinkering a lot, and 3D printer is an avenue for me to actually try out a lot of things, and even 3D printing is someone said Sundar was saying there's one 3D printer in college. Yeah, definitely you should try it out. So sometimes it's not easy. It's sometimes frustrating, right? The prints will not work. There's so many variables involved. It's not like your regular printer, you give a print command and it just prints it out. It's not like that at all. So you will have to sometimes, just battle with that to level the bed and so many things. But then the thing is, like, at the end of the day, you would be very, very satisfied. You can make something, imagine something, and then, having it in your hand is really, really precious. So definitely you should try it out. And there's so many Valley connections here. You would have, I think, heard about SpaceX, right? SpaceX sends reusable rockets. They make reusable rockets. And then all their engines are 3D printed. So it's amazing. And there's a company called Relativity Space. I have this picture of them on the right-hand side here. So they 3D print entire rocket engines, rocket parts. And it's really fascinating because rockets traditionally had like thousands of components. And now they have made it like less than order of tens and hundreds. So it's amazing because these 3D printed rockets are very, very reliable, and you can also make it much faster and much in a much better way than the traditional methods. And also there is this notion of Maker Faire. Maker Faire was an exhibition of creativity, if you will, and it was running until the pandemic. And I think after pandemic they are not doing it anymore. But this is something that in the Valley that I found it really, really interesting. I used to visit a lot of these Maker Faire events every year. Imagine a gathering of like so many how do you call them, like tinkerers, geeks, nerds, people who are interested in technology coming together and showcasing whatever they made. It could be a very simple thing, but they will have a table and then they will showcase a lot of things. And I saw a lot of 3D printers there. And this whole Maker Faire, the notion of Maker Faire is like, it's kind of like a science exhibition in a school, but imagine it as 100 times bigger than that, right? At a much like a carnival level science fair. So that was interesting to me. And finally, we come to the metaverse. Yeah, I should have animations on the slide, but I forgot to do that here. So nobody knows exactly what metaverse is. You hear a lot about metaverse, right? But everybody, you ask anyone, they will have their own definition of metaverse. So everybody talks about this today, nowadays. And you would have heard about the news yesterday. Facebook changed their name to Meta, right? Because of the metaverse, they are very heavily investing in metaverse. So what exactly is metaverse? So basically, it's about like having 3D spaces, right? Most of you who are playing games, you're already aware of the 3D environments. You go and do first-person shooter games, or like a world type of games. You go around in a 3D space. And there are other technologies like virtual reality, augmented reality. Virtual reality is like, you wear a headset and then you actually immerse yourself in a 3D environment, right? And augmented reality is like superpositioning the real world with 3D objects on top of it. So these kind of experiences all coming together in plus a social angle to it. So it's funny that, we actually did a prototype at Yahoo, myself and my colleague called Eric, like almost 8-9 years back. And we actually took what we call as backyard. It's like the corporate intranet. And we actually created a 3D world at the time. So we could have really called it a metaverse today. But this was like 8 years back. We were tinkering with the notion of connecting people through a 3D space, right? So what we did was like we took, everybody will have their own room. So let's say in a company, I will have my own room. My manager will have their own room. And we will all be connected by a pathway that leads to a manager's room and so on. So you'll have a complete network. So you can actually walk around everybody's rooms. And within a room, we would actually, take the Flickr photographs. So because it was Yahoo owned Flickr, right? And we had access to the APIs and so on. But yeah, anyway, the Flickr APIs were open. So we could get the Flickr accounts from the intranet. And so what we would do is like, we would have the pictures hanging on their walls, their actual Flickr images. And so we basically created a 3D space. So that is very similar to the kind of notion of what metaverse being discussed today. And there's so many problems to solve to make it a success. The headset itself, you can really get dizzy after a while, right, using a VR headset. And there's tons of challenges in the software, things like that. But it's an exciting space to be in. Why it matters to me, I have a lot of interest in computer graphics. When I was studying in school, college, right, I had developed graphics software at the time out of my own interest, 3D graphics and so on. So it naturally, I had so much interest in the 3D graphics aspects of it. Also, VR and AR opens up exciting possibilities, right? We talk about so many things like telemedicines, many exciting entertainment options, like you have virtual concerts and so on. So it's very fascinating in that aspect to keep a track on how this metaverse is going to be trending. Facebook is going to be spending $10 billion this year. They are going to hire like 10,000 people to work on metaverse. So that's mind-boggling. Apple is also working on metaverse. They're working on a kind of a headset, kind of a gadget. Google Glass already failed. You know that, right? They had a contraption where you can have like a AR type of glass, but then I'm sure they are also working behind the scenes to this. So these are some of the areas that I wanted to kind of highlight today. And then now we move on to the next section. I know we are already 1 hour, so already 7 o'clock. So let me try to take about 15-20 minutes in this segment before we wrap up. So the third part. So first we saw about what the valley is. Second, we saw some trending technologies, and then the valley connections. And third, we asked the question: can we replicate the valley? Right. So I'm going to talk about a couple of things: how to be Silicon Valley, an article, and then garage and some inspirations. So there is, I'm not sure if anybody heard about Paul Graham. So he is the founder of Y Combinator. Y Combinator is like a company that is an incubator of sorts, right? So there are lots of startups. So they fund a lot of startups, and then these startups had grown to be large companies. So many companies came out of Y Combinator. So he writes a lot of these essays. They're really, really fascinating to read. I've left the link here, so you can read these couple of articles. He has many essays, which is very interesting as well. So two noteworthy ones: how to be Silicon Valley and why startups condense in America. So these are really, really interesting essays. And I'm going to be focusing on the first one, how to be Silicon Valley. So he talks about, there are like two types of people in Silicon Valley, right? So basically, for any community to replicate Silicon Valley, you need basically two types of people. One is the nerds, right? And then the rich people. So nerds are people who are like really attracted to technology, right? So they are the mathematicians, they are the computer scientists, they are the technologists, they could be biotech, any disciplines. And then the rich people who has a lot of money to invest, right? So if you look at the valley, this whole system has three different types of people here, and what I call as the trifecta. So we have on the left is the university, right? So the people, most of these nerds are the creative type of people. They go to these universities here, and we have two major universities in the Bay Area. One is the Stanford University and the Berkeley, right? So and you have a lot of high caliber people. These are like the IITs of the US, if you will. And you have the concentration of very high caliber talent there. And then you have these startups, right? People who want to make a difference. And some of the most of the times, people who are in the universities, they start, they have the research being done in the university, and then they want to make a business out of it, right? And then they start doing the startups. And so the flow mostly comes from university to startups, and then the venture capitalists. So you have a whole ecosystem of venture capitalists there. So there is a road called Sandel, and many different venture capitalists are very close by in this area. And what they do, they go and these people go and pitch the idea to them, right? Some they could be doing a prototype sitting in the university, or maybe they are sitting in a coffee shop, and then they are laying out plans for building something. They build a small prototype, and then they go and what they call as an elevator pitch, right? So the venture capitalists, they don't have a lot of time to hear about all the different details. So you will have to tell them within 1 minute or 2 minutes, right, what your startup is about and why you should get their funding. And if they're interested, then they'll follow it up, and then they will provide a lot of funding to it. So that's how the seeds are sown for a startup, pretty much. And there's a lot of risks also involved in this, right? So having a startup, almost like 80-85% of the startups fail. But still, this venture capitalists, they take a lot of risks, basically. But then also they get a lot of rewards. So imagine like, even 5% of the startups are going to succeed, and they're going to, give billion-dollar returns. And it's going to be, it doesn't matter, because even if the rest 85% fail, they would have only spent much less than that. So this is a kind of the ecosystem that the Valley has. And he also talks about not bureaucrats. What this means is like, you can't have bureaucrats running the show, or like government running the show. We see a lot of, even here in India, even like, government trying to bootstrap things or trying to run stuff. But what Paul Graham says is that will not work. Basically, the reason being that, the agendas are different, right? So an investor, they are rich, but they are not like, they also are tech savvy. They know the technologies, so they know that certain things will work. So that's why they are in that business of funding things. But when a government handles, they have a different agenda, and they cannot make it work. And another one that he says is that it's not buildings. Silicon Valley is not just buildings. So you can see, we are building so many tech parks here. There so many tech parks around, and if you go on OMR, there's so many tech parks. I'm sure Coimbatore has a lot of tech parks. It's not buildings, right? So what he says is like, it's not what the space where these people are, because the key stage is before they want that space, right? The idea is already formed. That could be in their apartments, they could be working in their garages, they could be working in coffee shops. So before C1X was born, we were actually, building a prototype out of Starbucks, right? So we used to go to Starbucks pretty much like in the evenings. We used to, brainstorm ideas, and then we had a small team in Chennai. So that's how we built the startup, right? So even before we had an office building, even before we can go into a tech park, we had that idea. We had a small prototype. So we cannot just build a lot of buildings and say, hey, now I want to become a Silicon Valley. So that's not how it works. And we talked about the universities, right? And you cannot make universities just like that, right? And also the universities are very different in the sense that in the US generally, they emphasize a lot of research, right? Which we are not doing it in the other parts of the world, in India as well. And we primarily focus on education, but then the research is something that the US universities, especially Stanford, Berkeley, MIT, so many other, every university pretty much, right, public university, they have a lot of emphasis on research. And also they basically win a lot of funding. They get funding from the government, funding from different private companies to do the research. And the last thing also, he tells about like the young people. Young people are very essential to the ecosystem, right? So you can't have a bunch of, stodgy people trying to run the show, because young people bring a lot of fresh ideas to the table. And also, in addition to the energy, the enthusiasm, and they can also take risks, right? When you're young, you can take a lot of risk. And that is something that, he emphasizes in his essay. So I'm not going to go too much into the details. You can go and read that essay, and that would give you lots of other insights to it. But this is the gist of that particular essay. Okay, and this is a quote from Reid Hoffman. Reid is the founder of LinkedIn. So he says, Silicon Valley is a mindset, not a physical location, right? So this is also very true, because it's not only a physical location, but the mindset is basically like, if you want to try to replicate a Silicon Valley, then you should follow some of the mindsets and some of the things that, we are already, doing in some of the projects and other things that we do today. So the first thing is like the vision, right? When you talk about the Silicon Valley mindset, challenging the status quo, right? Many startups, they don't start with a vision of becoming $1 billion company, right? If you ask Mark Zuckerberg when he started, he didn't even dream of like becoming a $1 billion at that time, right? When he was making that small application, right? Brin and Page, they found it difficult to search for things, right? So that's why they came up with that algorithm. They invented a much better way called a page rank algorithm that led to Google. And so they all wanted to make a change, and they were actually challenging the status quo, right? They were not happy with the way things are. They wanted to make some change, and that's how it starts, right? Every startup starts with a vision, and that's something that I think we should also take into account. Even when we are trying to do some, things locally, there are so many challenges, right? Even here in India, we have so many challenges in terms of governance. Can we do things differently? We see roads in a much bad shape. What do we do about that? Can we, integrate technology? Can we do certain things that can, make life better for people, right? So we need to have that kind of vision. And the second thing is like innovation, right? Ideas, looking at, around us, like having empathy, looking at the problems to be solved. How can we bring about, change in the society, things like that. And I think that will give rise to ideas, new ideas. And that's how a lot of these startups are also, formed. The next one is the scale, right? A lot of these companies, when I showed you the map, you would have been familiar with many of them, right? Because they have a global scale, they have a global impact. Even though they were started in a garage or in a small place within the valley, they have bloomed and they have a international, the entire worldwide reach. Can we build products that have a global impact? I think that's something that we should always keep in mind. And the next one is the agile development, right? Software development or any kind of product development done in an iterative way. So traditionally, some of the companies, the traditional mindset is like you give the requirements, then they build something, they release something. That's the traditional waterfall. But the Silicon Valley method is very, very agile. And I see a comment. GCT Talks run on agile model. Fantastic. So yeah, agile is very, very, very interesting model, right? So where you take, we do something very, very small, right? Then we immediately release to the customer, and then we get feedback, and then we keep on iterating over that, and that's how we can build better products. And that's a completely a relatively new mindset of developing things. And it's also, it kind of also lends itself to a distributed model nowadays. Like teams are remote after the pandemic, and we have like tried to. We were like testing different models, right? Many companies were testing, how can we have this agile plus remote? How can we make it work and things like that? So agile model, really works better than the traditional way. And collaboration is another mindset, which is very, very important. You cannot do things on your own, right? You cannot be as an individual island and build fantastic products. We need inputs from a lot of people. That's why you hear this notion of a coffee shop mentality in Silicon Valley. Like you go to a coffee shop, Starbucks especially, right? You have discussions with people, you meet people, you talk, and you get ideas, and then you form a team. When I met my co-founder, right, we were in the same company, but then he was in a different department. And we had lots of talks over coffee pretty much, and then we understood each other's mindsets, whether we are having the same wavelength, before even you start a team to build, right? And then once we figure it out, and I think that's how you can build a team around you and really scale it up. Another interesting aspect is the fail fast mentality, right? Failure is actually celebrated in the Valley. So if you start something, you do something and then it fails, you better fail fast, right? You don't want to do something and then you fail later. But if you're able to fail fast and learn from the failures, and then move on to build a better product, that is really appreciated. And the ability to bounce back and then come back and then create better products is really. And so this kind of sums up the Silicon Valley mindset, if you will. This one is a picture of a garage, right? It's not very common in India. We don't see a lot of garages. But in the US, it's very, very common. Every house pretty much has a garage where you park your cars, right? And many people, like in the Valley, they use garage for other things. They don't park their cars. They will park their cars on the road. But then garage is basically a place where you tinker with stuff, right? You have your own, maybe they'll be doing the woodwork there, or they will probably be tinkering with, putting their electronics there and then soldering stuff, or creating things. And this is where it started. This is the birthplace of Silicon Valley. It is actually, you can see the plaque there. And this is where Hewlett and Packard built the first audio oscillator in 1938. And this is the genesis of the valley, if you will, right? And so my question is like, what is our garage? So what is your garage? Do you have a place for tinkering, right? Do you tinker with stuff? It could be software, it could be hardware, it could be anything, right? But do you tinker? I think as engineers, as students, we should be tinkering with stuff, right? We engineers, we are building stuff, whether it's virtual as a software or a product. What is that place? So you should start something. If you're not doing it, you should, pretty much start something. And I also want to highlight some of the GCT student innovators, whom I had a privilege of talking to last year, Arshak and Kalevani. And I was really amazed. They had a vision. Basically, they wanted to guide the rural students, basically, right? And they did not know what to study or what course to take and so on. And they went ahead. They built a community. They using whatever tools they had, right? And they were actually had a discussion with them, and they wanted to do a startup. And also Mahesh, Lalit, and Kabilan, many of you would have heard about their hip hop application, which is a fantastic TikTok replacement. So they built it on their own spare time, right? So these are all fantastic achievements. I'm sure I'm missing a lot of other people's achievements here, but these are people who have been interacting the last few months. So that's why I had, wanted to spotlight them here. But I think they are like examples to us, right? So we should be innovative, start thinking about it. You have all the tools, right? Things are democratized right now. So there's nothing like, you can learn anything you want on the web. So nothing is stopping us from making something, right? Building, trying out new things. So that is something that I would like to emphasize. And another thing on the valley that I would like to highlight is that there are so many places to be inspired. One is the Computer History Museum, and then the Tech Museum of Innovation, so on. So the Computer History Museum is a very fascinating place. So it showcases the evolution of computing, right? Right from the first transistor, first IC chip, and you see the whole progression, like how computing over the years, even before the Silicon era. And basically you get an idea of like how computing has evolved. And that gives a fantastic, a window into the past and also a window into the future. So when we say museum, it's not only the past, but they also showcase how things have been trending, what are the new innovations that's coming up, and so on. While Computer History Museum focuses on the computing side of things, the Tech Museum of Innovation is for all disciplines, right? They have a lot of biotech exhibits and so many other fun things, fun exhibits, and so on. Excuse me. So, so basically, I have a question here. Like, can we have our own computer museum and the tech to inspire younger generation, right? So this is a question that I was asking, and I've been also discussing with a few people, and we formed a small team. I'd like to show in the next slide. We came up with this idea of Chennai Computer Museum. Okay, so I'm not sure, you might have heard, some of you might have heard of Dr. Govindarajulu. He's a prominent author. He has written books in computer hardware in the 90s and the 2000s. So I had a discussion with him, and then we put together a set of people. And right now, we are having a vision to basically build a computer museum in Chennai. Okay, so the idea is that we can basically showcase a lot of these technologies, and then the history of computing, where computing is trending, and this would be especially very useful for the younger people, right? If you imagine, we have been like most of this, I would say, like this generation, right, didn't have the luxury of seeing how things originated, right? We take a lot of things for granted. Most of you probably started with a smartphone, and then you had laptops and so on. But we don't have that kind of a view into the past. So I think to get inspired, and this is to show the how things have transformed and how things have developed over the years, and also to showcase what is the future, right? So showcasing the new technologies and getting kids really excited about this. So this is the kind of initiative that we want to put together. And we actually took it to the government as well. And we had very good traction. This was in 2019, before the pandemic, late 2020, 2019, early 2020, I think. But after the pandemic, we had a bit of a pause, but then we are trying to get it going again. So you should you can go and join the LinkedIn groups or the Facebook group, and you can also visit the website. And if you would like to volunteer, you're also very welcome to do so. Okay, and also on the GCT side, we recently started a GCT coding club, and this is a Telegram channel where we discuss coding problems, general programming, etc. And also, we sent 4 teams to the ICPC coding contest. ACM ICPC is the International College Year Programming Contest, and which is like the Olympics of programming contests, right? And we were able to send 4 teams, and then 1 team also made it to the regional. So that was fantastic progress. And this is a channel where even if you're new to programming, if you don't know anything about programming, you're welcome to join, ask questions, and learn from everybody. And also there is another community called GCT Startup Community. There's spectacular work by VC, Vijay, we fondly called us VC, Bhargava, Wayland, and a few others. Sorry if I missed out your names, but they've been very instrumental in creating this startup community where they educate students about startups, connecting the students with the startups, and also encouraging entrepreneurship. So if you're not already part of this community, I would also really encourage you to join there. Great. So I'd like to summarize. So we first saw the Silicon Valley, why it matters to us, the history and the geography, economics. And then we saw some trends in the valley, and also my personal take on some of them. And we also saw what it takes to be the Silicon Valley and the Silicon Valley mindset, right? So the key takeaways are that we can also build an ecosystem like the Valley. So we have all the ingredients, right? We have students, we have the alumni to basically encourage the students. Of course, we can get venture capital, right? We can once it's kind of it's a virtuous cycle, right? Once we have a couple of startups, and then people see the value, then they start invest more. And but we know we saw what are the ingredients that can make up an ecosystem. And we can also use the Silicon Valley mindset in our daily work, right? So these are some of the takeaways, and I hope this was useful to you. And if you have any questions, I know if you can ask, you can ask right now, and I can take a few minutes to answer. And I think I saw one question already from Sundar. Since we received 79 zettabytes of data, how trustworthy is it? Social media getting so many data, how do we segregate the news based on its truthfulness? Yeah, this is a very good question. So he's asking, how do we trust the data? How do we, whether it's truthful or not, right? So there's whenever a social media is there are so many opinions. So I think the social media, whether they are they have to moderate the content, or can they just let it go, right? So there's always a fine line between complete moderation and you cannot be biased also, right? Because people are the ones who are moderating. They might have their own biases. If you take the US, you have the Republican view, you have the Democratic view, which is a very liberal view. So what to allow, what not to allow. So they have lots of policies in place to make sure that they are not biased, but still, things can get biased, and they can influence a lot of things. We saw about we read articles about influencing the elections as well, right? They have so much power even to influence who comes to power, so on. So yeah, it's a problem, and it's something I think it's work in progress. I don't think there is a definitive answer to it. So Gautam asks a question: is the hardware sector not able to reach the pace at which software is growing? I'm not sure. I think there's been a lot of advancements in the hardware also, right? I mean, Apple recently released the M1 chip, and they were showing lots of comparisons with the Intel chip and how great their hardware is, and so on. And we saw the Moore's law also taken into account, right? And many people say there's it has come to a plateau, but we still see the miniaturization. In one of the presentation, Apple said they have put 57 billion transistors in the M1 chip, the current chip. So that's huge. So I don't think there's a lot of advancements, and especially with the GPU side of things as well, right? With NVIDIA taking the lead on that, so much advances there, and that has actually enabled the software. The GPUs are pretty much the components where they are being used for mining in cryptocurrency, for lots of AI, and so many other things. So there's tons of progress in hardware also. So I'm not sure how to compare the pace because it's very subjective, but I think there's a lot of progress there.
So Raj, this is Pradeep here. So the link that I posted on the Zoom chat is about how a team is building hardware to cloud, collaborate on the cloud. So there's a group that has recently come up with an initiative, just to add on to what Gautam was asking. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, and we also see open source hardware nowadays, right? Like starting from Arduino, that basically kind of opened it up, and you can have open source hardware, and I think collaborative design is very, very nice in that regard as well. Can GCTians contribute to a computer museum? Absolutely. It's not our computer museum. It's not my computer museum. It's our computer museum. Yes, definitely. I would really welcome your thoughts. Right now, it's in a kind of a vision state, right? Vision, and we are doing some planning. We are trying to see, where to locate that. What kind of artifacts that we have. Trying to kind of firm up the vision, things like that. So definitely, you can participate. You can volunteer, you can provide your ideas. If you have anything to, even physical hardware to share, things like that, you can definitely contribute. Does the Silicon Valley still see 8-hour, 5 days working? Would it reduce or increase? Actually, 8 by 5, Silicon Valley, people work much more than that. The normal 8 hours, 5 day, it depends, right? It depends on what stage of the startup you are in. Sometimes people work a lot in terms of when you're trying to, mostly out of passion, right? Because when you do a startup, nobody is driving you unless you got some funding and investors want you to build a product very soon. But if you are having that, most of the time you'll have a luxury of or the freedom, right? Luxury of freedom to do whatever you want. And so to bring it to fruition, you will pretty much work, and work is more of a labor of love rather than somebody forcing you to do certain things. So the 40-hour mentality, or is pretty much non-existent at the time. So we try to whatever it takes, try to get some product out. And then once we establish a company, and then we basically, also you need a balance, right, between the family as well and then the work. So would it reduce or increase? Right now we are seeing, there's a lot of rebalancing of that time as well, because of the pandemic, right? People tend to work in whatever time that they want to. So in our offices, we try to keep some core hours, where we expect people to be in Slack, at a certain period of time. And beyond that, we don't really care when you work, whether you work at 3 a.m. in the night or early morning. So we don't care. And another question is, what is beyond AI? Where do we go from there? Beyond AI. I don't know. I mean, AI itself is scary, right? I think it was Elon Musk who tweeted about that. AI can be scary as well. So there's so many things that AI is still bearing fruits, right? You might have heard about the GitHub Copilot recently, GPT-2 and GPT-3. these are systems where they have massive amount of data, massive amount of data, and then using this GPT, you can actually, the computers can write code, right? It can write poems, it can write, it can do things, it can write blog articles for you. And so where does it end? We don't know. And actually, that's why they're not even giving free access to everybody. So it can be used for even bad purposes. So yeah, there is a bit of responsibility aspect to it. So we cannot make the AI run haywire. So there is some responsibility in terms of people who are controlling the data. And that's why I was saying, like, data is one of the biggest assets as well. So controlling whoever is controlling the data also control that aspect of AI. And that's why you have companies like Facebook and Google, Apple, they all want to build their own silos of information. So yeah, that's all I can say about that question, I think.
Good evening, sir.
Hi, good evening.
Yes, sir. Sir, as you concluded, Silicon Valley is a mindset, and I think we Indians are much into this mindset in the past years, and I think that's why we had nearly 34 unicorns this year, and mostly having origin from Bangalore. So, how healthy is the culture here in our country, and what are the trends here? Are they same as the global trends, or do we have any local trends?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think we even surpassed the number of unicorns. We surpassed China this year, I think, right? So that's a great accomplishment in terms of the what do you call, the confidence that the investors have put in our companies here. As for the physical locations, many of them are based in the Bangalore, which is also called as the Silicon Valley of India, right? Because of the ecosystem and there's so much concentration of talent as well. So yeah, definitely, I think that is something to be proud of. But at the same time, right, many of these startups here, initially at least, they were all very kind of copycatish, right? So many of the companies, they took ideas and then they tried to implement for the Indian people, right? You can take a lot of examples. And some of them are like, there are a few companies. Recently, they are trying to cater to the Indian audience and then coming out in a completely unique way of doing things. And I think that is also to be appreciated. So yeah, so that I think that is something that we should also take into account. And what was the other question you asked about Bangalore? And
so what are the trends here, sir? Are they same as the global trends, or we have any local trends?
I mean, trend-wise, I think there's a lot of money coming in from the investors, I think, and that's good news. And I think if you look at like 15 years back, we were trying to raise funds, and we were talking to some of the capital companies in India. At that time, the mindset was completely different, right? People were looking at immediate returns, and nowadays I think they are willing to wait for long-term returns, so not for immediate returns. So I think that is good in a way, because that gives a kind of a runway for companies to grow and then produce better results. So I think that is a positive trend I see.
Thank you, sir. We have a question from Mrs. Niranjana. She asked, how do you compare what Zoho is trying to compare to Silicon Valley mindset?
Yeah.
And
nice.
Yeah.
A
Also, a
good
part
question.
of the questions is all US startups have Indians, not necessarily studied in Stanford or Berkeley. For example, Freshworks was from Shastra.
Yeah. Good question, Niranjana. So by the way, Niranjana is my classmate from my CSE classmate. So her first question was, how do you compare what Zoho is trying to compare to Silicon Valley mindset? Yeah, I think Zoho is a very good example in terms of the Silicon Valley mindset, right? And what they did was to basically start off, it's a pure product company, right? And I think they built a product ground up here, and they also had like kind of the agile methodology and the mindset of trying to promote the product, market the product in a very nice way, even to global audience, right? So definitely, I think they did, they did have the Silicon Valley mindset of building the product, trying to iterate it. I've used the early versions of Zoho and looking at. I was actually recently using one of their recent products. They have come a very long way, I think. Even surpassing the capabilities of the competitors there. So I think that's a good thing. And the second part of the question was, all your startups are Indians, not necessarily studied in Stanford or Berkeley. Yes, yes, definitely. Again, Freshworks started from here, right, from Chennai, right. Girish Mathrubudam, and I think he started here and then he moved to the US recently. Actually, I had met him a couple of years back in one of the conferences here. So that's a great story. Freshworks itself is another great success story. Again, that's Freshworks is if you guys are not aware, Freshworks is a CRM tool, basically, right? Your customer relationship management, call management. It's like a call center management kind of technology. And one part of the question was like, they don't have, they're not necessarily studied in Stanford or Berkeley. But what I was saying from the Silicon Valley, or the initial stages of the Valley, was that a lot of these startups, they have founders coming in from Stanford or Berkeley. And of course, as you know, like Valley is a melting pot, right? So you have so many cultures, not only we have lots of Indians there, we have lots of Chinese, we have lots of Europeans, pretty much everybody from the world. And I think that is one very important thing there to note. Yeah, I mean, of course, like not everybody is from those prestigious institutions, but they are all contributed to the success of these startups. And but many of these successful startups also have people who have studied in Stanford, Berkeley, Google, Yahoo, Facebook, so on. So yeah, so you can there's a correlation, but also you have other cases as well. I hope I answered that question.
Thank you, sir. Let's take the last question. Sundar Ganesh asked, what would be reason for students being here and not having Silicon Valley mindset? Okay. I think there's also cultural annotations to that. I think that's something that I think we need to change something that we need to change as a culture. One is the risk-taking aspect, right? Most of the times we are not encouraged to take enough risks when we are growing up here, I think. So I think that has to change. And even if you're failing, doing something, where, we have like expectations from the students, whether they can go into engineering stream or medical stream, or, only a few pathways we provide them. And I think that kind of restricts the students to have that kind of like, there is no, how do I say that? There's no freedom to innovate, if you will, right? I think it's kind of curtailed in certain ways. I think we need to start from there. Even the education system has to be changed in a lot of ways, make it very practical. And we still see, like, even to get into IIT, today we have to cram a lot of things today, right? But you cannot do that. You can't get to MIT or Stanford or Berkeley by just cramming things. No way, right? Because you need to do something. You need to establish yourself. So there's a huge gap there in terms of like, being able to like having the freedom of doing things early on. I think that's a very, very big advantage when we compare people in the US from here, students especially. And but I think that's changing also at some extent. So having that Silicon Valley mindset, starting tinkering early on, right? Starting creating new things, being able to leverage technology for a lot of even in education, right? Trying to use a lot of technology. Those are the things I think can get the students in that mindset.
Thank you, Raj. That was very insightful, and I thank for all the time you took for walking us through the cool technologies. And it's as if like we are seeing a Tony Stark of GCT in the
No.
I mean in the rising. So with that said, let me hand over the session to Varshini to give the closing credit. Varshini, over to you.
Yes, sir. I'd like to propose a vote of thanks today. First and foremost, I would like to thank Raj. Thank you for giving an overview of Silicon Valley, explaining the current tech trends. Knowing about the history of the valley was really interesting and inspiring. Thank you for spending your valuable time. It's a pleasure to have you here, sir. And also, I would like to finally thank the organizing team for putting together this wonderful talk. Thank you.
A small token of appreciation from us, from all of us at GCT Talks. So with that, we'll wrap up the session. So, sir, you can stay back on the call.